Are you looking at purchasing property in the greater Colorado Springs area? Well, today we're going to talk about 6 things that you should know and go in eyes wide open in a transaction before buying property. But this is not a fear-mongering video. I'm all about buying property and I think it's a fabulous time to buy. We're going to talk about 6 things that are important things to consider when buying property right now. I connect with people just like you every day to help them discover where to live and invest in real estate and sell property for top dollar when the time is just right for them. My name is Leif Jacobson. I'm an ex-cop turned realtor, also known as Safe Leif. If you're new to this channel, subscribe so you're first to learn about Colorado real estate and issues just like we're talking about today, because I'm all about people being well informed. My contact information is below. I'm super excited to hear from you. Reach out by text, call, or email after this video, or book a calendar event and I'll reach out to you. The national housing market has been in turmoil for years after going crazy in 2020, 2021, and then undergoing a correction when interest rates jacked up in 2022 and 2023. So there's no question there's a correction, but that doesn't mean values have gone way down. A lot of people don't understand the difference between value and what people are willing to pay for a property and overpay for a property. So just because you see asking prices going down and even median or average home prices going down doesn't mean the values have tanked. Those are two different things. Values haven't gone down $1 in Colorado Springs, but people aren't overpaying 90, 100 grand for property more than it's worth anymore. So there is a correction in the market as far as trajectory and how much people are paying for properties. But that correction, if you look year over year as a long play, which I recommend in real estate, unless you're a flipper or doing fast real estate deals, vast majority of people are looking year over year, decade over decade, as far as long play of real estate values. And I think that's the wise way to look at it. Values haven't gone down at all. We had a 4% increase in value in the last couple years in 2022 and 2023 in Colorado Springs, when everybody thinks, oh, the bubble's popped and it's another '08, and values are tanking. No, they're not, but people aren't overpaying for property anymore. So there's a hockey stick curve that happened there, and a correction that happens for people not overpaying for property doesn't mean looking historically as far as values going down. It's very important to understand the difference. U.S. News in 2023 and 2024 actually ranked Colorado Springs as the 9th best place to live in the entire United States as far as cities, and the 94th best place to retire in the entire United States. So it's a very desirable area. That's why real estate values are continuing to increase and steady, and we're seeing amazing growth. Colorado Springs is one of the fastest growing cities in the entire United States right now. Colorado property taxes are actually some of the lowest in the entire country. So if you're looking for lower taxes, who doesn't want to pay less taxes than more? Colorado is a fabulous place to look. And Colorado Springs taxes in general are less than the Denver area, and the metro area is kind of up north. Colorado Springs is about an hour, hour and a half south of Denver, depending on, Denver's a huge area, depends on where you're referencing there. And taxes and costs are far lower, including healthcare, utilities, and transportation. All of those costs of living are generally lower than a lot of states in the United States, as well as compared to other cities like Denver in Colorado. Appreciation of property and real estate values are a huge part of our capitalist society, which is great and part of the basis for which our country was built. So people generally are counting on real estate to be a fabulous investment over time. And I don't know of another investment even better than the stock market. If you look long-term, decade over decade for the last 120 years, the real estate market offers better return than anything that I'm aware of. I'm not an economist, but I am pretty well read and studied and know my stuff and know my historical numbers. And real estate is a fabulous investment in general as far as long-term exponential growth. So as you're considering that long-term exponential growth, you want to consider about 6 factors, and that's what we're going to cover in this video, 6, that are important to consider when you're buying property, looking at the future value of that property and trying to forecast that. Nobody has a crystal ball, and I don't either, but trying to forecast that looking forward as far as which property is going to be a fabulous investment for you. And those are the things that I filter through. Those are the things I want to help you understand and that I'll advocate for you as your real estate professional in looking at property and vetting that, because we're always trying to weigh what property, how good of a fit it is for you and or your family, as well as being a great investment. We don't want those to be tilted too far either way. It's fabulous if a property is a great investment, but if you're going to hate living there, it's not a great property for you. The same thing the other way around. A property you could say, oh, I love this, so I totally want to live there with my family. It's beautiful, but if it's a poor investment, that may not be the wisest choice for you. Now, it's totally up to you where you want to live. I'm not going to tell anybody where they want to live. I'll help you buy any property you want. But most people want my opinion and ideas reference what kind of an investment it'll be, and generally want kind of equilibrium or pretty much a balance between those. It's got to work well for you and be a fabulous investment in the long term. And the first of the 6 things that we're going to talk about is location. We've all heard location, location, location in real estate is the first factor, and I would say the most important factor. When you're looking at real estate value in total, location is absolutely vital. Historical pricing is number 2, and age and condition of the property itself, as well as the improvements and structures and any house or building on it, is number 3. Upgrades and updates is the 4th thing we're going to look at. Storage space is the 5th thing we'll take a look at, which generally doesn't change unless you really move walls or change the footprint or the configuration of the house. Storage is storage, and people like storing things, especially Americans, because we're stuff people. We have so much stuff, and generally we fill the space that we have available with more stuff. People care about storage space. And then the last thing we'll consider is the lot, as far as the size, the amenities around it, and the location, the orientation of the lot actually makes a huge difference in the real estate value long term. Location is the first thing that we will talk about, and I think is the most important, as a 40,000 foot view, is the most important thing to consider in real estate value. And that's proximity to accesses to amenities and resources in a city, whether that's close to downtown or other kind of major thoroughfares or nucleuses, as far as shopping centers and movie theaters and restaurants and access to amenities. So there's a number of areas and locations in town that I'll note in Colorado Springs. I'll put these up on the screen for you. Are the Old North End, Patty Jewett, Shook's Run, Pikes Peak Park, Old Colorado City, Gold Hill Mesa, and Ivy Wild. Those are some older classic neighborhoods that are not far. They're minutes from downtown and access to all the resources that downtown offers, as well as nearby little cities like Manitou Springs and cute kind of walkable spaces and other amenities. Proximity to those is important. So these have long-term great real estate appreciation as far as value because of their location. Colorado Springs is relatively well designed and is of a size and orientation where generally, if you're comparing to Denver or New York, Los Angeles, it's not bad. You're really minutes from almost any resource, whether that's 20 or 25 minutes even within the city would be a long stretch as far as getting to any access or resource or shopping or community or entertainment. It's pretty well designed and orientated and sized so you have access to all the resources that you need in general without driving for an hour or 2. This translates into better commute times as well. Now, that's all relative, okay? If you're talking to somebody who doesn't like a 10-minute commute, that's one thing, and they'll complain about 12 being out of control. You talk to somebody from Los Angeles or, bigger cities, Miami, places where it's insane as far as commute time. You can commute 2.5 hours each way. If you're going to and through a city or in the nucleus of a city, 10 or 15 minutes commute is heaven for a lot of those people. So there is a basis of comparison that makes a huge difference when you're comparing commute times. Generally, your commute in Colorado Springs isn't more than 20 minutes, and that would be going a good size of distance across the city. The quality of schools in Colorado Springs is outstanding. So 3 of the top 20 high schools out of the 512 high schools in all of Colorado are located right in Colorado Springs. So we actually have 3 college campuses in Colorado Springs as well. Views and green spaces are a big deal in Colorado Springs as well. There's over 9,000 acres of parkland and over 500 acres of trails in Colorado Springs. And we all have heard of Pikes Peak, which is right up and outside of Colorado Springs, right through Manitou Springs, which is a cute little town just to the west of Colorado Springs. You're looking right up at Pikes Peak. And generally, the whole city slants uphill coming out of the city to the east. So almost anywhere in the city, if you're commuting to and from or going especially, east and west in the city, if you're headed to the west, generally you're gazing upon the front range, we call that, of the Rocky Mountains and Pikes Peak, which is snow-capped most of the year right in Colorado. So it's great, great views. If you're up in Castle Rock or Denver up to the north, You can see the mountains, but they're way off in the distance. This feels like it's right on top of you. A lot of people live in Colorado Springs specifically because they love looking at the mountains to and from their commute for work every day. The neighborhood amenities and community areas in Colorado Springs are pretty darn well done. There's lots of planned communities within Colorado Springs and little pocket parks, they call them, which are the little kind of corner parks within a neighborhood all around, as well as larger and city and state parks throughout Colorado Springs for tons of recreation, from mountain biking to hiking. You can go right in the middle of the city. There's Palmer Park, which feels like you're in the middle of the Rocky Mountains, even though you're smack pretty much in the middle of the east side of Colorado Springs. You're just minutes, basically, from incredible recreation and lots of outdoor activities. It's a huge outdoor focus in Colorado Springs. And we find that the neighborhoods and recreation centers are outstanding because it's a long, cold winter in Colorado Springs. When it's 5 degrees outside, it's pretty nice to head down to your rec center and swim at the indoor pool inside nice and warm, or go in the lazy river. That's pretty nice in a long, cold winter. The second thing we'll look at when to consider when you're buying in Colorado Springs, or really buying anywhere, these principles are universal in my opinion, as far as across the United States, but I'll focus on Colorado Springs because that's where I'm located, is historical pricing and data. So the best indicator we've all heard of future growth is past growth and historical data leading up to that. And part of the analysis I'll do for you when we're looking at any particular property, as you whittle things down and decide on properties, narrowing down to 2, 3, 4, or 5 that you're looking at, is comparable properties around and what property has sold for. So generally property is worth what someone has paid, not what they're necessarily willing to pay, but what they have paid in the past for property. That's what we're looking at in a comparable property. So a comp or comparable property generally is a property that's sold within the last 6 months. We can go up to a year, but it's nice, especially in the last few years, to go just within the last 6 months. Give or take a few hundred square feet with a similar number of bedrooms, similar number of bathrooms. Finished and unfinished square footage is pretty similar. Lot size would be pretty similar as well as within about a mile radius of others. Now, sometimes that's not necessarily universal. Sometimes we need to stick within the same neighborhood. You can have 2 neighborhoods right next to each other, and one is far more desirable as far as real estate and real estate value. So we need to watch for that. We can't just draw a 1 mile radius as the bird flies and say, hey, they're all the same, because a neighborhood, like we talked about, rec centers and amenities and value of neighborhoods and homeowners associations in neighborhoods can vary greatly between them. So we're looking at those types of components when we're deciding on, hey, well, let's look at comparable values and see what a property is worth. What somebody's asking for property is sort of irrelevant. It's all about what it's worth, and we get in trouble later if you offer on a property and it's worth, say $490,000 to you, but if it's only going to appraise at $450,000, the deal's not going to go through anyway because the loan entity is not going to give you your loan to buy a $490,000 house that's worth $450,000, which is not in your best interest either. So we're looking at lots of different factors there, and my job in part as your fiduciary and advocating for you is to make sure that you're not offering more money than a property is worth, which is not in your best interest and doesn't serve you well. Reference future value, of course, because you'd be underwater the moment you bought it. We've all heard that term. We don't want to pay more than property's worth. And it's pretty rare to pay far less than property's worth if someone has a good agent representing them, like I do as well with representing sellers. It's all about a win-win for both parties who are going in eyes wide open and generally know the value of the property and getting a good deal and fair market value, or maybe just a little under fair market value if we can. If we could go way under, that's great, but that's less common. Generally, we're looking for at or just under fair market value for a purchase price. The velocity of the real estate market we're also looking at as far as those historical data numbers. How fast and the volume of property that has sold in a specific area compared to another or compared to some of those comparables is a big deal, as well as we future, kind of try to predict, nobody can see the future, but as we try to predict future value and the prospect of appreciation, we're looking at those factors as well, as far as long-term desirable areas and neighborhoods for people to buy property in. And we're looking for long-term steady growth as well in that same vein. So we don't want properties necessarily where there have been spikes, and then tanks and, lots of volatility in the market as far as values. We want neighborhoods that are historically very desirable to invest in and have appreciated in general pretty consistently over time. The third thing we'll cover is age and condition of home. It's a huge deal when a home has been maintained and upkept and updated well versus a property that hasn't. And we all know what those look like and how those feel when you go through a neighborhood where there's not a good pride of ownership and houses have not been well maintained. I mean, you're talking expensive components. That's why houses are hundreds and thousands and millions of dollars to purchase, is because they're very expensive to build, and they're actually expensive to maintain. When you look at, or getting a bid for roofing, siding, windows, kitchen revamp or remodel replacement, electrical, plumbing, HVAC, the systems and structure and lumber and finishes add up to be huge amounts of money. And it's large amounts of money in order to keep those updated and to refinish those over time. So there's great value in, and on kind of the good and bad news is, the higher the dollar amount of those things in general, the greater return that you'll get. So, a kitchen remodel can easily cost $25,000, $35,000, $55,000 just to update and revamp a kitchen, but it'll increase the value in general of a property, at least that amount or more, depending on how much labor you spent and materials you spent and how reasonable you were and providing good value in the update of that kitchen. In reference to the age of a structure, 20 to 40 years is kind of a magic spot that can be good or bad. Just like a vehicle that's not been well maintained, and when it has a certain number of miles on it, you got major systems, then they're extremely expensive to fix at a certain age. And 20 to 40 years is kind of that magical realm with a house as well. If a house has been well maintained and kept up and those systems have been maintenance, then that's great. If they haven't, boy, at that 20-year mark, 15, 20 years for water heaters, HVAC systems, a lot of the systems in the house are expensive and need to be replaced. Appliances, have a life of 10, 15 years, kind of depending on the appliance. And we're looking for all sorts of dozens of indicators and signs to tell us whether the house has been well maintained or not and has good value for you, and how quickly you may have to upgrade or update any of those things. Roof replacement is a huge issue, especially in Colorado Springs because of hail. We have large hailstorms here, and they happen every few years. Any particular area will be hit by hail in general. So it's kind of rare, actually, to find a roof that's 20 years old in Colorado Springs. Most are replaced less often because it can be difficult to insure a roof fully that's more than 20 years old. But in Colorado Springs, the good and bad news is that it's probably, an average roof in Colorado Springs, I think, is like 7.5 years as far as average time for roof replacement because of hail damage, not because the roof shingles only last so long. Most roofs will last 20 or 30 years. But they are replaced much more often because of hail damage in Colorado Springs specifically. When we're talking about age being low, i.e. new construction or newer neighborhoods, there's nothing wrong with and there's not, just like a brand new vehicle, there's nothing like the smell and the feel of a house that's never been lived in. I totally get the value of that. But it's important to look longer term in general when you're buying, because the greatest value comes when a neighborhood is completed, not when it's currently under construction. So some of the neighborhoods in Colorado Springs have thousands of homes in one neighborhood. I mean, Banning Lewis is one neighborhood in Colorado Springs. There's 4,000 homes in Banning Lewis right now. There's room for 120,000 homes in one single neighborhood. It's a 50-year build plan, over 50 years to build out this neighborhood. So you need to watch that as far as values. That's kind of the outlier and the exception. Most neighborhoods are not a 50-year build. Most neighborhoods are, 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe 10-year build. And so you need to look at that as far as value. If you're going to be there long term, that's just fine. But if you're going to be there a year or two in order to sell, it doesn't mean it's a bad buy necessarily, but you need to be aware that you're going to be competing when you go to sell. If it's a 5-year build and you're selling 2 years into a newer neighborhood, you're going to be competing with the other builders when you go to sell. And that can be tough. For a similar price, people generally want a brand new property. A lot of people are apt to buy new rather than used when things are relatively comparable. So keep that in mind. If you're buying in a newer neighborhood, then it might be a little longer before you see some larger appreciation because you're competing with the newer construction houses. And then the same goes the other way. Kind of the antithesis is older and seasoned neighborhoods, kind of like antiques. There's some point where the graph crosses itself and things become more value because there are, 50-year-old trees and mature growth and an ambiance in a neighborhood like the Broadmoor in Colorado Springs is a very high-end resort community neighborhood with multi-million-dollar homes. It is legendary as far as the ambiance and parks and golf courses. So neighborhoods kind of antique, if we can use that terminology, and actually become exponentially more valuable over time because of the age of the amenities, again, depending on how they're maintained and upkept and updated. The age of structures and houses in an area is actually less important than maintenance and upkeep. You can have a neighborhood that was built out in the 1940s and 1950s. If vast majority of the homes have been gutted and rebuilt, there can be incredible value there. So as appraisers look at property and valuation, they actually take condition and updates and maintenance much more heavily as far as a weight factor versus just the raw age of a property. It's more about how it's been upkept and updated and rebuilt and remodeled over time than just the sheer age of a property. The fourth thing we'll cover is upgrades and updates as far as properties. Not all improvements to properties bring a good value and return. And I've done several other videos that speak to this as well, so check those out. Maybe we'll link them here in this video. There are plenty of ways, just like we talked about earlier with kitchens, bathrooms, windows, siding, as far as upgrades and remodels. Those things provide value. There's plenty of things that do not provide value, like hot tubs, pools. Those are rare in Colorado when we have long, cold winters here, but some people have pools. And a lot of things outdoors in general, such as landscaping. You can have beautiful landscaping. You can easily spend $50,000 or $100,000 bringing beautiful landscaping into a property, which you might enjoy, and there's nothing inherently wrong with that, but it's not going to provide great return when you go to sell the property. Other than outlying cases, if you have somebody that's a golfer and you built a golf green in your backyard and they're looking for that specifically, okay, they might choose to pay good value. But generally, people are not looking to pay top dollar for expensive or extravagant improvements in the landscaping arena. One thing that actually brings huge value to a property is the number of bedrooms, many of which are used as offices now. That's a huge contingent with the remote work environment and people working from home, is bedrooms that are converted into offices or used as offices. But here's one thing that a lot of people don't know. About a year ago, Colorado actually changed the regulations regarding what's considered a legal bedroom in the state of Colorado, which used to have to include two components. One was a closet for wardrobe and clothing, and the other was an egress window for fire escape and safety. And they nixed one of those, which is the closet, just a year ago in Colorado. So you no longer have to have a closet in a bedroom as long as there's a door and it's enclosed space and there's egress and a way to make it out of there safely if there is a fire or a danger. What used to be an office, which had no closet, is now considered a bedroom. A lot of clients ask me if finishing an unfinished basement provides a good return, and the answer is generally yes. The amount you'll spend finishing the basement generally increases the value of that house at least that amount, if not more, as far as the value that it brings, especially depending on what you're adding in that basement as far as number of bedrooms, which is a huge factor in what increases value, and number of bathrooms as well, as a kitchenette or a mother-in-law living space. Those can provide huge value, especially if you have access to those, or a garden view or walkout basement where you have stairs and or a door and access to those. That can provide exceptional value. So it generally provides really good return on investment for finishing out a unfinished space. Another general paradigm of an upgrade that does provide good value is generally opening up spaces rather than having them closed off. So houses in the 70s, especially 80s and 90s, spaces were super chopped up and compartmentalized, lots of small rooms and kind of choppy rooms. People want great rooms, they want openness now. So generally, in this era, decades later, if you open up space in general, it provides greater value. So while we talked about elaborate landscaping not providing a great return, actually manicure and yard care on the front of a house as far as curb appeal is a big deal. Nothing extravagant necessarily, but being super clean and crisp, well-maintained, well-appointed, well-proportionate as far as the front of the house, that provides great value and will increase the velocity as far as how fast a property will sell in its demand when you put it on the market. Garage doors, especially when they face the street at the front of the house, that's a large part of the two-dimensional square footage that you're looking at when you look at the front of a property. The garage door makes a huge difference as far as how that property feels and how updated that it feels or dated as it feels. So generally, you get 130 to 160% of value as far as return replacing the garage door. So garage doors are a few $1,000s. They're expensive, but generally you get a great return, and it really changes the front of the house for many places that are super dated or antiquated, really changes how it feels. Exterior paint is another one of those things that can add incredible value despite the incredible price. It's often $5, $6, $7, $9,000 to paint the exterior of a residence, but man, it makes a huge difference, especially with that first appeal. We all know first impressions are a huge deal, and people will walk or not even, a lot of my clients will drive by a property if the outside looks like it's in really rough shape, an older color, and or trim that's rotting or stuff that's not in great shape. We won't even go in and look at it. And the inside can be as gorgeous as anything. If the outside is not presentable, people will walk necessarily. Decks and patios do provide value in general. Again, and not exorbitant or massive, extravagant ones, but you also don't want them too tiny. You don't want a tiny little deck out the back it's not even big enough for a couple of chairs for somebody to sit down and have a conversation. So generally, fair-sized decks and patios. I prefer patios, to be honest with you, because I'm kind of a low-maintenance guy. So I'd rather have a patio that you can pressure wash once in a while, and it's super low maintenance. But there's nothing wrong with synthetic decking as well, as far as synthetic lumber that can be pressure washed as well. But you got to be careful that you don't damage it when you pressure wash it. Fixtures and hardware really tell the story as far as how updated a house is as well. And generally, that's pretty cost effective for lighting fixtures, plumbing fixtures, and other hardware as far as doorknobs and drawer pulls on kitchen cabinets and that type of thing. Those are generally, in the scheme of things, compared to the other big dollar things that we've talked about, they're pretty inexpensive to replace and really changes how a house feels. So that provides a good return in general, switching out hardware and fixtures. Flooring is a big deal as far as upgrades, and generally good flooring, as long as you spend good quality money on flooring and good quality install, so it's not a cheap or kind of chintzy install, provides good value and good return in general. So LVP, luxury vinyl plank flooring, we've all seen it in commercial applications as well as getting more and more popular in residential applications. LVP is fabulous. I'm a huge advocate for that for clients. Good LVP flooring is actually more expensive than many hardwood floors. So it's not cheap, but it wears really well. It's incredibly durable. It's very easy to clean. You can get it in all sorts of gorgeous colors. So it's not, when people hear vinyl and they assume we're going back to the 70s and 80s as far as vinyl flooring. This is a different world. It looks like wood plank and or stone floors. There's thousands and thousands of looks you can get in LVP flooring, and generally it's incredibly durable, especially for dogs and pets and animals, things like that. They would have scratched the heck out of a wood floor. They won't even touch luxury vinyl plank flooring. So make sure that it's actually vinyl all the way through, not just vinyl in a tiny layer on the top, which can get scratched. And if there's particle board underneath, that's the cheaper stuff. And that's where you're paying good money for flooring that's actually solid vinyl all the way through, which is also water impervious. So you won't get water if there's water or water issue. It can still go to the edge of the floor and go underneath the floor from the sides, but generally the floor locks together as they install it, and many are floating as far as the floor itself is kind of free floating on the floor, but it's all locked together in one big piece, and the water won't go through any cracks in the floor like you can with wood. Paint color is something I'll touch on real quick. Make sure you do a relatively neutral paint palette. You don't want to have the Pepto-Bismol pink bathroom and the lime green bedroom. That's generally a turn off for people. You want grays and tans and pretty neutral paint colors in general that'll go with other decorations depending on how the house is outfitted. So don't go crazy on paint. Generally, people do not resonate with that and will walk. Energy efficiency is a buzzword these days. Over the last couple decades, people are more and more sensitive to that. Reference systems and appliances. People will pay thousands of dollars more to save thousands in utilities over time. The one exception to that generally is solar. Generally, in my experience, solar does not provide a good return on investment. People generally don't want to pay. It's incredibly expensive to reimburse and pay for that. And generally, solar does not pay itself off. If you're going to be in a house for decades and you're not moving, solar may be of value to you, but don't put it in thinking it's going to provide a greater value to sell the house. Generally, it doesn't. The fifth thing we'll cover is storage space. This is actually a big deal for people, and it's tough and expensive to change the amount of storage that you have in a property in general. So the number of closets, if people like walk-in closets, rather than just a door-in closet, as well as linen closets and other storage for things, just to keep things super clean and crisp and clutter out of the way. It's actually a pretty big deal. If you've ever lived in a house that doesn't have a lot of storage, man, you got to put stuff somewhere. And again, we're Americans and we're stuff people. We have all sorts of stuff and we just collect more stuff all the time, it seems like. So a house with good storage, people comment on that a lot when we're looking with my clients at houses. Outdoor storage is a big deal as well. So a good yard shed out in the yard where you can store stuff and keep it nice and clean and keep stuff out of the way is really nice. And or if you have a garage where the back of the garage butts up to the back of the house, man, I love it when houses put in a garage door at the rear of the garage coming into the back of the house, so you don't have to have a shed out there and you can wheel stuff into the back of your garage from the rear. That's pretty slick. Although sheds don't add a lot of resale value themselves, they can add to the velocity of the sale or the desirability or how fast the house sells basically because it has those things. Even though people won't necessarily pay more dollar amount, it may sell more quickly because people like having a place to put their outdoor gear. The sixth and final thing we'll talk about is the lot and size and orientation and amenities to the lot where a house is built. Generally, a more symmetrical lot or square rectangle lot is more valuable than a funky, weird-shaped, pie-shaped lot in general. So that's not a universal rule that we can apply, but I'm just talking in general as far as desirability and market demand. You want a more uniform lot, which is generally more usable space as well. When you have a pie-shaped lot that's in a sliver that goes way out, it's expensive to fence a property like that and or landscape a property like that. And a lot of it, when it comes down to a point, you really can't use that yard for much space. So generally open and more symmetrical is better than funky or sharp shapes and lot lines. Orientation is important as well as roads and other amenities that are nearby. A lot of people don't think about that, and that's why I ask clients to drive by properties before we go look at them in general to qualify them, because sometimes, unless you're looking at an aerial view, if you're just looking up an address on a property that looks nice and the house is beautiful and it's been remodeled and it's gorgeous, and then you go and realize that backyard butts right up next to a freeway and there's lots of road noise, or a train is nearby, or an airport, you don't necessarily know how the lot and where the lot is located in reference to what's around it. So those are the things that we need to vet and carefully qualify to make sure that those things aren't a huge deal. Now, I'll also qualify that a little bit in that people think sometimes that things are going to be like a train, even if it's a mile or two away, and they're worried about the train noise. That's white noise in general. After a week or two, you might notice it when you're first moving in, but you don't even notice it over time. So some people are averse or assume that even a busy street behind their house is going to be a huge problem. But a lot of people, it doesn't even faze them. And after a couple weeks, they don't even hear it. It's kind of white noise in the background. So don't just chalk off a property necessarily because it has one of those things. But again, this is all about going in eyes wide open and being aware of what it is before you buy it. So that's what we want to do, so you can consider all those things and whether they're right for you. A trifecta that I've always liked as far as lots. You want generally a lot, and those are the most desirable, that are high, dry, and light. So people like, daylight and feeling light and bright. They want dry, so you don't want to be, in a buckle or a saddle, where you can have water issues. When it rains in Colorado, it rains hardcore. And that's why we have big aqueducts here and places for that water to go. So you don't want to be in a saddle where it's going to funnel all that right through your yard or wash out yards. It happens all the time. When we get rain in the summertime here, it comes down pretty hardcore. And you want to be high. Now we're all high as far as elevation in Colorado in general, over 6,000 feet, up into 7,000 feet when you get up in the north part of Colorado Springs. So high, dry, and light is a trifecta that I like as far as general qualification of a lot and location. So there you have it. There are 6 things. Hopefully I covered some valuable aspects and consideration and helping you share some perspective so you can have more things to consider when you're buying property in Colorado Springs. Please consider those things. Reach out to me and I'd love to discuss all those in much more detail with you and serve you as a client. I would love to work with you. So my contact information is below. Reach out by text, call, or email after the video, and or share things. There's all sorts of thousands of things that we could share in this topic and in this conversation that I can't cover all in one video. So if you want to hear more about any particular thing and or hear videos that are covering other things that I missed, please let me know. These videos are for you. They're not for me, as far as providing value and good data so you can make the right decisions in property that you purchase and sell. Thanks for letting me be a resource for you. I'll look forward to seeing you on the next video.